The mansion sat at the top of the hill, shining under the morning sun, its marble walls and wide glass windows catching every beam of light. The kind of house people only see in magazines or on TV. Inside, everything was perfect to perfect, some would say. There was a grand staircase with polished wooden steps, chandeliers hanging from the ceilings, and rooms so large they felt like small halls. The furniture was expensive, of course, carefully chosen by professional designers, but it all felt cold. Not cold in a bad way, but cold in a way that made people feel like they were in a museum rather than a home. The billionaire who lived there was a man known to the world for his business genius. He had built companies from scratch, made deals that others only dreamed of, and had the kind of wealth that made most people's imaginations spin. His life was public yet private in a strange way. People saw him on television, at charity events, or in the newspapers, but they never really saw the man himself. To most, he seemed unshakable, unbothered, a person whose mind always moved faster than anyone else's. But in truth, his life was exhausting. Meetings, calls, negotiations, and flights filled every hour. Sleep was a luxury, and meals were often grabbed between planes and boardrooms. At the top of that staircase, in a room far away from the business world and the glare of public attention, his daughter lived her own quiet life. She was 17, and to the outside world she seemed like just another teenager with access to everything money could buy. Expensive clothes, private tutors, the latest gadgets, trips to places most people could only dream about. Her life was full of privilege. But what no one knew, not even her father, was how quiet and lonely she felt. She had grown up in a house where people came and went, where the staff always spoke politely but never really saw her, and where her father's attention was rare and fleeting. Her room was decorated with soft colors, simple furniture, and small personal touches she had added herself. A few photos of family trips, a notebook full of sketches, and a small bookshelf with worn-out novels that she loved most of all. It was her own little corner of the world, away from the expectations, away from the loudness of wealth. She spent hours there reading, drawing, and dreaming. But what she really loved, the thing that made her heart beat fast and her soul feel alive, was music. There was an old piano in the house, a grand one that had been there for years, forgotten in a quiet corner of the mansion. Its keys were slightly yellowed, its strings slightly out of tune, but to her, it was perfect. She had discovered it one day by accident, hidden behind curtains and dust. From the moment she pressed the first key, she felt a connection she couldn't explain. Her father, meanwhile, was preparing for yet another trip. He had meetings across the country, boardroom discussions, and social events that required him to be charming, quick, and unshakable. He often looked at his daughter as he left the house. She was sitting at her desk, scribbling something in her notebook, headphones covering her ears, but he rarely paused. A quick wave, a nod, and he was gone. He assumed she was fine, that she had everything she needed, that she was happy in her world of privileges. What he didn't know, what he would never suspect, was how much she longed for attention, for connection, for someone to see who she really was. The morning she planned to spend at the piano began like any other. She woke up early, as always, enjoying the quiet before the house stirred to life. The staff moved silently, tending to chores and breakfast, but she ignored them. Her world was in the piano room, where she would spend hours playing melodies she made up herself. She had no formal lessons, no teacher, no one telling her what to do. She learned by ear, by heart, letting her fingers follow the music that lived inside her. Each note she played was a small rebellion against the silence of her life, a whisper to the world that she existed, that she mattered. Even if no one else seemed to notice, her fingers danced across the keys, creating music that was raw, emotional, and beautiful. She played softly at first, careful not to disturb anyone, but as she got lost in the moment, the music grew stronger. She closed her eyes and imagined an audience, imagined people being moved by her playing. She imagined her father listening, not with the eyes of a wealthy businessman, but with the heart of a parent. She imagined him understanding her in a way he never had before. And for those few moments, she was not invisible. She was seen. She was alive. Outside the piano room, life carried on as usual. The staff moved quietly, keeping the mansion running like a well-oiled machine. The walls seemed to swallow sound, making the house feel even larger and emptier. The servants knew there was a piano somewhere, but they had never heard her play. They assumed it was just decoration, like most things in the mansion. No one asked questions. No one cared enough to listen. And maybe that was the way she liked it. She didn't need an audience. She only needed the music, the freedom to play without judgment, without expectation. The hours passed quickly. She tried new melodies, experimented with rhythms, and let her emotions guide her. Sometimes she played sad pieces, letting out feelings she didn't know how to express in words. Other times she played cheerful tunes, imagining a world outside the mansion where people laughed easily and life was simpler. The music became her friend, her teacher, her confidant. She even began to write down her compositions in a notebook, planning to one day share them, although she wasn't sure with whom. For now, the music was enough. It was her secret, her treasure, her hidden gift. Meanwhile, her father was miles away. In a skyscraper conference room filled with glass walls, city lights, and powerful men and women talking business. He was discussing investments, mergers, and acquisitions, his mind constantly moving, analyzing, and calculating. He wore the face of confidence and control, but inside, there was a growing emptiness he couldn't name. Despite all his success, despite all the wealth he had accumulated, he felt something missing, and yet he couldn't stop. He couldn't pause. There was always another meeting, another deal, another problem to solve. He thought of his daughter occasionally, but only in passing, assuming she was fine, assuming she was happy, assuming she had everything she could ever need. Little did he know, she was living a world that existed in secret, a world of music and imagination that he had never entered. Back in the mansion, the afternoon sun began to cast long shadows across the piano room. She played without noticing, lost in a song she had never heard anywhere else. Her heart raced with excitement, with fear, with hope. She imagined telling her father about her music one day, but fear held her back. What if he didn't care? What if he thought it was a waste of time? What if he dismissed her like everyone else? She stopped for a moment, resting her hands on the keys, breathing heavily. The music had taken everything out of her, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the loneliness that had been there for years. Evening approached, and the mansion began to stir. Lights came on in different rooms, staff prepared dinner, and the city outside began to glow with life. She put on her jacket, grabbed her notebook with her compositions, and slipped into her room. She stared out the large window at the view below, the city lights twinkling, cars moving like rivers of light. People living lives she could only imagine and felt a strange mix of hope and sadness. Her life was full of luxury, yes, but it was empty in ways money could never fill. She longed for attention, for understanding, for someone to truly see her, not as a daughter of a billionaire, but as herself, with her own dreams and talents. That night, her father returned home earlier than expected. He had finished his meetings ahead of schedule, his mind still occupied with thoughts of business. But there was a rare calm in him that came from finishing work sooner than planned. He entered the mansion, greeted the staff politely, and walked through the grand hallways toward his study. The house was quiet, as it always was at this hour, and the faint sound of music reached his ears. At first, he thought it was a recording. Perhaps one of the staff had put on a piano tape. But as he listened closely, he realized the melody was too complex, too emotional, too alive. He stopped in his tracks, confusion and curiosity mixing in his mind. The sound was coming from a room he rarely entered, a part of the house he had almost forgotten existed. Slowly, carefully, he moved toward the sound, expecting to find some kind of automated device or hired musician. What he found instead would change everything. The music filled the hallway before it reached him, soft at first, but growing stronger as he walked closer. It was strange and unfamiliar, unlike anything he had heard before. He paused outside the room, hand hovering over the doorknob, heart unexpectedly racing. Something inside him told him this wasn't just a recording or background sound. The notes were alive. They had weight, emotion, a story. He slowly opened the door and peeked inside. There, sitting at the old grand piano, was his daughter. She was completely absorbed, eyes closed, fingers moving across the keys with a precision and confidence that took his breath away. He froze in place, unsure if he should announce himself or remain hidden. The melody she played was gentle yet commanding, playful yet serious. It was as if every feeling she had ever held inside was spilling out through her fingertips. For a long moment, he just watched. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He couldn't. The sound wrapped around him like a warm blanket, strange and comforting all at once. He realized that for all the wealth and power he had never experienced anything like this. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, closed impossible agreements, and navigated crises that could topple empires. Yet here he was, mesmerized by the music of his own child, something so simple and pure that it cut through all the walls he had built around himself. The daughter didn't notice him at first. Her head was bent slightly, lips moving as if she were singing silently, lost in the rhythm of her own creation. Her hands moved gracefully across the keys, and even though the piano had seen better days, it seemed to come alive under her touch. She had taught herself everything, spending countless hours listening to recordings, imitating, experimenting, and inventing her own compositions. The process had been quiet and solitary, something she protected fiercely. No one had ever asked her to play. No one had ever noticed. Until now, suddenly she felt a presence behind her and froze mid-note. Slowly, she opened her eyes and saw her father standing there. The shock in her chest was immediate and overwhelming. She had never expected him to walk into the room like this, never expected him to hear her at her most vulnerable. Her hands hovered over the keys, unsure whether to continue, stop, or run. He stepped closer, moving cautiously, his eyes never leaving hers. There was no anger, no judgment, just a look of awe that she had never seen before. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out at first. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft echo of the last notes fading into the room. "Did you play that?" he finally asked, his voice low and uncertain. She nodded, barely able to speak. I just... Her voice trailed off. She had rehearsed what she would say if he ever discovered her secret. But now that moment had arrived and words seemed useless. He sat down slowly on the edge of a chair, leaning forward as if trying to absorb every detail. "You taught yourself?" he asked again, almost unable to believe it. She nodded again, her eyes wide. "I've been playing for years. I didn't think you'd care." His gaze softened, but it was mixed with a strange mixture of guilt and amazement. He realized then how little he had noticed her, how often he had been too busy, too caught up in his world of wealth and power, to see the life growing quietly in his own home. He felt a pang of regret he hadn't expected, a weight pressing down on his chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. I thought you were too busy," she admitted. "I didn't want to bother you. And I liked playing in secret. It felt safe." He nodded slowly, understanding more than she knew. He realized that in his absence, she had built a world that was hers alone. A world where she could exist without expectation or pressure. And yet here she was, showing him something that was beautiful, rare, and completely hers. For a while they sat in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't need words. The room smelled faintly of old wood and polish, the kind of smell that reminded him of forgotten corners of the house. He watched her, noticing things he had never seen before. The way her fingers curved naturally around the keys, the slight tilt of her head, the focus in her eyes. He realized that this was more than a hobby. This was a talent, a gift, something that had been developing quietly for years while he had been blind to it. She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I've been playing every day," she said softly. "Sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet, I didn't want anyone to hear me because I didn't know what they'd think." He leaned back in the chair, still taking it all in. He remembered the countless nights he had spent alone in boardrooms, thinking he was missing nothing, thinking his world was complete. And now, here was proof that the world he had ignored, the world of his own daughter, was far richer and deeper than anything money could buy. "Would you play for me again?" he asked finally, his voice gentle. "I want to hear more." She hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face. Then, slowly, she sat back down at the piano, brushing her fingers across the keys. The notes were soft at first, testing, but as she grew more comfortable, the music filled the room again. This time, it was different. It felt safer somehow, knowing he was listening, knowing he was not judging, knowing he actually cared. He closed his eyes, letting the melody wash over him. Each note seemed to tell a story of loneliness, of dreams, of longing for connection. He felt emotions he hadn't realized. He carried regret, pride, wonder, and a deep, unshakable love. He knew that all his achievements, all his money, all his power had never given him a moment like this. Nothing in the world had ever mattered more than listening to his daughter create something so beautiful, so pure, so undeniably her own. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The music rose and fell, changing with every emotion she poured into it. Sometimes it was joyful, light, and playful. Sometimes it was somber, deep, and almost heartbreaking. She experimented with harmonies, rhythms, and melodies she had never tried before, feeling a rush of freedom she had never known she could share. He watched her, fascinated, asking questions here and there about the music, about her inspiration, about her techniques. Each question made her smile, a smile he had rarely seen, a smile that seemed to light up the entire room. Eventually, she paused, letting her hands rest on the keys. She looked at him, unsure of how he would respond. "Do you really like it?" she asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. He smiled. A genuine, unguarded smile, the kind that didn't happen in boardrooms or at public events. "I don't just like it," he said. "It's incredible. I don't know how to explain it. I've never heard anything like this before, you. You have a gift, and I had no idea." Tears welled up in her eyes, not just because of the praise, but because someone had finally seen her. Really seen her. All the hours she had spent alone, all the nights she had practiced quietly, all the moments she had felt invisible, they had led to this. And now she felt recognized, valued, and loved in a way she hadn't imagined possible. He reached out, placing a hand gently on hers. "I should have noticed sooner," he said. "I should have been here. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much I was missing." She shook her head, tears spilling over. "It's okay. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to bother you. I didn't know if you'd care." He held her hand a little tighter. "I care more than anything. I promise you, from now on, I'll make sure you know I see you, I hear you, and I'm here for you." That night, for the first time in years, the mansion felt alive. It wasn't the grandeur of the halls or the expensive furniture that made it feel alive. It was the connection between father and daughter, the shared understanding, the recognition of a hidden world that had finally been revealed. Over the next few days, he found himself thinking about her constantly. Every decision, every meeting, every conversation in the business world seemed less important now. He wanted to come home, not just to check in or to maintain appearances, but to listen, to encourage, to share in her world. And she, in turn, felt braver, more confident, and more connected to him than she ever had. She continued to play, sometimes softly, sometimes boldly, but always with the knowledge that her music mattered, that her talent was real, and that the one person whose opinion she valued most now truly understood her, the old piano. Once forgotten and neglected, had become a bridge between two lives that had run parallel but separate for too long. The mansion no longer felt empty or cold. It hummed with the possibility of connection, the warmth of recognition, and the joy of discovering something extraordinary where no one had thought to look. And as the sun set over the city, casting golden light into the piano room, father and daughter sat together, listening to the melodies, sharing silence, and feeling for the first time in a long while that their world, although full of wealth and privilege, was finally filled with something far richer: understanding, love, and the discovery of a hidden gift that would change both of their lives forever. The following days felt different in the mansion. The silence that had always hung in the halls seemed softer, almost welcoming. The daughter continued her secret practice at the piano, but now it wasn't so secret. Her father spent more time at home, walking past the piano room just to hear her play. Sometimes sitting quietly in the corner, listening without interrupting. The simple act of being present changed everything. She noticed small things about him, so the way he leaned forward when a melody caught his attention, the faint smile that tugged at his lips, and the unusual softness in his eyes when he watched her. It was a side of him she had never seen, and it made her feel closer to him than she ever had before. Her music began to take on new life. Knowing her father was listening, she experimented with dynamics, with emotion, with flow. The melodies grew richer, bolder, and more confident. Sometimes she played long pieces that lasted for hours, each note carrying her imagination, each pause heavy with feeling. And with every song, her father was there, fully engaged, offering no instructions, no judgments, only appreciation. One evening, after a long day filled with calls and meetings that had left him exhausted, he returned home earlier than usual. He expected to find her in her room, reading or drawing as she often did. But instead, he heard the piano. Her fingers moved quickly across the keys, playing a piece that sounded almost professional, intricate and emotional, yet entirely her own. He leaned against the doorway, watching her, feeling a mix of pride and awe he couldn't put into words. "You've grown so much," he said quietly. Careful not to startle her, she stopped mid-note, eyes wide, and smiled nervously. I've been trying new things," she admitted. He nodded encouragingly. "I can hear that. You're not just playing. You're telling stories now. You're speaking through your music." Her heart lifted at his words. This was more than praise. It was recognition. Recognition of something she had carried in her soul for years. Recognition that she had longed for but never expected to receive. For a moment she felt free, unburdened by expectation, unpressured by comparison. She was simply herself, and someone she loved had finally seen her, the father. Meanwhile, couldn't shake the thought that perhaps her talent deserved more than private recognition. He had grown up in a world where skill and achievement were always shared, celebrated, and sometimes exploited. But he also knew that fame and pressure could crush a young spirit before it had a chance to bloom. He thought carefully, balancing his instincts as a businessman with his instincts as a parent. He wanted her to have opportunities, but he wanted her to keep her love for music intact. It was delicate, a tightrope walk he had never anticipated. The daughter, unaware of his inner struggle, continued to play. She experimented with melodies she had never dared to try before, each note infused with emotion and imagination. Sometimes she laughed aloud at an idea that surprised her. Sometimes she sighed at a passage that didn't come out right. Her father watched it all silently, realizing that this was the first time he had truly witnessed her grow. Not academically, not socially, but personally, emotionally. He understood then that this moment, these days, were more important than any boardroom victory, any financial gain. One afternoon, curiosity got the better of him. "Have you ever thought about performing?" he asked carefully, unsure how she would react. She paused, fingers resting lightly on the keys. Her eyes widened, a mixture of excitement and fear. "Perform? No. I don't think I could. What if I make a mistake? What if people don't like it?" He smiled softly. "You've been making music for yourself all these years, and it has brought so much life into this house. I think the world should hear it too, but only when you're ready. Only if you want to." She nodded slowly, considering the idea. The thought of performing, even for a small audience, was terrifying. Yet there was something thrilling about the possibility, something that made her heart beat faster. She had spent years hiding her talent, but now she wondered if sharing it might bring more joy than secrecy ever had. In the following days, the father began to take steps, quietly, to create opportunities without overwhelming her. He arranged for a private teacher to come, someone who could guide her without pressuring her. He spoke to friends in the music industry who could offer advice and encouragement, all while ensuring that nothing would be public unless she chose it. The goal was simple: nurture her gift, protect her passion, and let her discover her potential in her own time. The daughter, for her part, continued to grow. With guidance from the teacher, she learned new techniques, explored different musical styles, and began composing more structured pieces. Her fingers grew stronger and more agile. Her understanding of rhythm and harmony deepened, and her confidence began to blossom. And through it all, her father remained present, not as a businessman, not as a critic, not as an observer, but as a parent who simply wanted to support his child. There were moments of doubt and frustration. Sometimes a passage would not come out right. Sometimes her emotions would overwhelm her and she would stop feeling exhausted or defeated. But her father never criticized or hurried her. He would sit quietly, offering a comforting presence, sometimes gently encouraging, sometimes simply holding space. It was a new kind of parenting for him, one that demanded patience, empathy, and understanding qualities he had rarely needed in his business life. One evening, after an especially long day, the daughter played a piece she had been working on for weeks. The melody was haunting, slow at first, building gradually into something rich and full of emotion. He listened intently, realizing that she had developed a depth to her music that was beyond her years. Every note seemed to carry her story, her fears, her dreams, her longing for connection. He felt a lump in his throat as he understood more clearly than ever the immense talent and sensitivity she possessed. When the piece ended, she looked at him, uncertain. Did you like it?" she asked, her voice small. He shook his head slightly, still overwhelmed by what he had heard. "Like it? It's remarkable. It's more than that. You're telling a story with your music, something that words cannot express. I've never experienced anything like this before." Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she smiled. For the first time, she felt truly seen, truly valued. Her music was no longer just a secret. It was a bridge between her and the father she had longed to connect with. And for him, it was a revelation proof that the quiet, seemingly invisible world of his daughter was far richer and more extraordinary than anything money or power could create. But as the days went on, new questions began to surface in his mind. How could he nurture her talent without exposing her too soon? How could he protect her from the pressures and expectations that fame and success often brought? And most importantly, how could he ensure that she would continue to love music for herself rather than for approval or recognition? He began to research carefully, reading about prodigies, young musicians, and the delicate balance between encouragement and pressure. He spoke quietly with professionals who had worked with young talent, asking questions, taking notes, and carefully planning steps that would allow her to flourish without losing herself. Every decision was guided by one principle: her happiness and growth came first. Meanwhile, the daughter continued to explore her music. She composed new pieces in secret, drawing inspiration from the quiet moments of the mansion, the distant city lights, the sound of rain against the windows, and even the subtle expressions on her father's face as he listened. She discovered that music could express what words could not, could connect her to others, and could give her a sense of freedom she had never known. Their relationship deepened with each passing day. They spent hours together in the piano room, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking softly, sometimes laughing at mistakes or playful experiments. The mansion, once a place of emptiness, began to feel warm, alive, and full of possibility. It was no longer a house defined by wealth and privilege, but a home defined by connection, love, and the joy of discovery. Then one afternoon an idea came to her father. "I want you to play for someone else," he said carefully, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes. She shook her head quickly. "I'm not ready. I can't." He smiled gently. "No one is asking you to perform for the world. Just for someone small, someone who can appreciate your music. I want you to feel the joy of sharing it without fear." She hesitated, then slowly nodded. The thought of letting another person hear her music was frightening, but it was also exciting. For the first time, she imagined her music having impact beyond the walls of the mansion, reaching someone who would truly understand and appreciate it. The following week, he arranged for a private session with a musician he trusted, someone gentle, kind, and supportive. The musician arrived quietly, avoiding any pressure, and listened carefully as she played. For the first time, she received professional feedback, not criticism, and it was encouraging, thoughtful, and kind. It gave her a sense of validation she had never experienced before. As the days passed, she practiced with more focus, experimenting with new techniques and styles. Her confidence grew steadily, and she began to see herself not just as a girl playing in secret, but as a musician capable of expressing profound emotion and creativity. Her father watched all of it, silently proud, realizing that his role was not to push or control, but to guide, protect, and encourage. By the end of the part, the mansion was no longer a quiet, lonely place. The piano room became a sanctuary, a place of growth, discovery, and connection. The father and daughter had discovered something far more valuable than wealth: understanding, trust, and the shared joy of discovering a hidden gift together. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion slowly transformed into a place of music and quiet excitement. The piano room became a space where both father and daughter spent more and more time together. She practiced with new techniques her teacher had introduced, exploring melodies she had never dared to play before. Sometimes her father would sit nearby, reviewing work documents or reading quietly, but his presence was more than just physical. It was reassuring, grounding, and comforting. The daughter began to realize that someone in the world cared deeply about her passion and her feelings. It was a feeling she had longed for, but had almost stopped expecting. One afternoon, while she was playing a particularly intricate piece, the doorbell rang. She froze, unsure who would visit at this hour. The mansion was enormous, and visitors were not uncommon, but they were usually associated with formal events or business discussions. She looked toward her father, who had also paused in surprise. He gestured for her to continue playing, and she did, softly. Unsure whether the visitor would hear her or not, the butler entered the room shortly after the bell, bowing politely. "Sir, a music instructor your father contacted has arrived early. She is here to hear the young lady play and provide some guidance." The daughter's heart skipped a beat. She had prepared for lessons with professionals before, but the thought of someone else hearing her play, someone she had never met, made her palms sweat. She glanced at her father, who gave her a reassuring smile. "You've been practicing a lot. Just show her what you've been working on," he said softly. She nodded, inhaling deeply to calm herself. As she began to play, she noticed the instructor's expression changing. The woman's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with admiration. Every note the daughter played carried skill, emotion, and depth. She had grown so much in the past weeks. It was evident to anyone who listened. When she finished, the instructor clapped lightly, careful not to startle her. "That was incredible," she said. "I've worked with many young musicians, but you have something special. Your talent is natural, and it is also deeply expressive. I can see how much time and care you've put into developing it." The daughter smiled shyly, her cheeks flushed. "Thank you," she whispered. I've been practicing for years, mostly by myself." Her father stepped forward. "She has been working quietly for a long time," he said, pride evident in his voice. "I only recently discovered how gifted she is." The instructor nodded, understanding the delicate balance. "You've been nurturing something rare. Many children with talent don't develop it fully because they are either rushed or not guided correctly. But with patience, support, and the right guidance, you can become remarkable." The words filled the daughter with a strange mixture of excitement and fear. Excitement because someone recognized her talent, someone outside her family. Fear because recognition often brought expectation and pressure, things she had worked hard to avoid. She looked at her father, who gave her a gentle nod. "It's your choice," he said. "No one will push you into anything. You decide when, where, and how." Over the next few weeks, the instructor visited regularly. She guided the daughter through new techniques, helped her refine compositions, introduced her to different musical styles. The daughter absorbed every lesson eagerly, thrilled to learn from someone who understood music so deeply. And with every lesson, her confidence grew. She began to play pieces she would never have imagined attempting before. Feeling the music flow through her with increasing ease, her father continued to support her, sometimes sitting quietly in the background, sometimes asking thoughtful questions about her compositions. He learned more about music in those weeks than he had in his entire life. Not from reading or listening, but by watching his daughter create and grow. It was fascinating to see her process, to witness the way she connected with every note, every rhythm, and every melody. One day, after an especially long session, the instructor paused and looked at the daughter seriously. "You are ready," she said. "Ready to share your music beyond this room. You have developed your own voice, and it deserves to be heard." The daughter's eyes widened. I'm not sure. I've never played for anyone outside this house." Her father stepped closer. "You don't have to go far. Just a small audience. People who can appreciate your music without overwhelming you. I will be with you every step of the way." After much discussion, they decided on a small private performance at a friend's gathering. It would be intimate with only a handful of people, all of whom were kind and respectful. The idea of sharing her music outside the piano room terrified her, yet there was also a thrill she couldn't deny. She worked tirelessly to prepare, practicing pieces that reflected her deepest emotions. Melodies that had been kept secret for years. On the day of the performance, she felt a whirlwind of nerves. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched the keys. Her father placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're ready," he said. "No matter what happens, this is your music. You control it." The room was quiet when she began to play. At first, the melodies were soft, hesitant, but gradually, as she gained confidence, the music filled the space with life. The guests were captivated, drawn into the world she had created. They leaned forward, listening intently, some closing their eyes to absorb every note. The daughter played with all the emotion she had stored inside for years, her music telling a story without words. When she finished, there was a brief silence, followed by soft applause. The daughter's heart raced, a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. Her father smiled proudly, the warmth in his eyes reflecting the pride he felt in her courage and talent. The guests complimented her genuinely, careful to encourage rather than overwhelm. And the daughter felt something new, a sense of validation beyond her father's approval. After the performance, her father and the daughter sat together quietly, letting the experience sink in. "You were amazing," he said simply. "I knew you were talented, but seeing you share your gift, it's more than I could have imagined." The daughter smiled, a mixture of pride and relief. "I was scared," she admitted, "but it felt good. To let someone hear me, to let someone understand." Her father nodded. "I can only imagine how it feels. And I'm proud of you, not just for the music, but for having the courage to share it." Word of her talent began to spread quietly. Friends of friends, people in the music industry, even acquaintances of the family, all started to hear about the young musician in the mansion. Her father was careful to control exposure, ensuring that no one pressured her or invaded her privacy. It was a delicate balance, but he wanted her to grow naturally, to develop her passion without losing the joy that had made her music so special. The daughter continued to practice diligently. She composed new pieces inspired by her experiences, her emotions, and the subtle beauty of the world around her. Every day, she grew more confident in her abilities, more certain of her identity as a musician, and more connected to her father, who remained her greatest supporter. One afternoon, after a long session, her father approached her with an idea. "There's a music academy hosting a small showcase for young talent," he said. "It's not a competition, just an opportunity to play in front of a few professionals who can give you guidance. I think it could be good for you." The daughter hesitated. "I don't know. What if I'm not ready? What if I make mistakes?" He smiled, gently taking her hand. "Mistakes are part of learning. You've grown so much already. This is just a chance to see where you stand and to get advice. You won't be forced to do anything you don't want." After some thought, she agreed. The day of the showcase arrived, and the mansion was quiet as she prepared. Her father stayed nearby, offering encouragement and reassurance. When she stepped onto the stage, the nerves returned, but she focused on the music, letting it guide her. As she played, the audience was captivated by the depth, emotion, and skill she displayed. Each note carried a story. The sincerity of her performance resonated with everyone in the room. When she finished, the applause was warm and genuine. The professionals offered thoughtful feedback, praising her creativity, technique, and emotional expression. The daughter felt a mix of pride, relief, and inspiration. She realized that her music could touch others, that sharing it did not diminish its beauty or intimacy. Returning home, she sat with her father in the piano room. "It was different," she said softly, "but it felt good." "To let people hear me?" he nodded, smiling. "And they heard something extraordinary. I'm proud of you for taking this step and for staying true to yourself." That night, the mansion felt alive with possibility. The piano room was no longer just a private sanctuary. It had become a space of growth, recognition, and connection. The father and daughter had discovered that talent, when nurtured with care, could create bonds stronger than any wealth or privilege. And as the daughter drifted to sleep, she felt a quiet certainty. Her music was hers to share, and the world, carefully and gently, could begin to hear it. The weeks that followed the showcase were filled with a quiet excitement. The daughter continued to practice in the piano room every day, her confidence growing steadily. The private lessons with the instructor became more advanced, and she began to experiment with compositions that reflected her deepest emotions. Every note she played felt purposeful, intentional, and alive. Her music was no longer just a secret. It had begun to find its place in the world, carefully and gently. With her father always nearby to support her, one morning her father entered the piano room with a thoughtful look on his face. "I've been thinking," he said. "There's a small concert happening at a local community center. It's intimate, just a handful of people. But it could be a good opportunity for you to perform in front of an audience that genuinely appreciates music. No pressure, just sharing your talent."